Welcome to the Circle of Birth podcast. I'm your host and advocate, Ali Kranz. These podcasts are here to gather stories, people and information to better our understanding of the wisdom of birth and how we can reclaim our connections to birth from conception and beyond. You will hear stories not only from Australia but from all over the world, bringing together women, partners, midwives, doulas and all the people that have a birth story to share. So jump right in for this next Circle of Birth story. Welcome to episode 11, and firstly I'll put a trigger warning on this episode, and certainly here what we're doing with these podcasts is talking about the beautiful empowering journeys that people have. So before you listen to this show, you will hear of a hospital experience with some heightened notes to it, then an honourable journey of birth and death. So if you're not in a position to hear this now, and especially probably if you're about to give birth, just leave this episode for now, but make sure you come back to it at another time. This journey is a beautiful one and definitely needs to be shared, as you will hear of a life that what we feel may be very short-lived was filled with love, support and choice. This is especially helpful for anyone facing trisomy or any chromosome issue in pregnancy. So this episode today connects with Kylie. And Kylie's a mother of 3. She's an advocate for good food and has a wonderful business called The Little Raw Foodie. And she's even made someone cry with her raw vegan slice. Kylie shares today with us her story of her 3 births. First is a hard labour in a hospital where she found her journey that support and continuity of care are the utmost importance when birthing. And I could see firsthand here with this story why our doulas are super beneficial in birth. Her second story is a journey with their son Daniel, who was diagnosed with trisomy 13 and lived a beautiful life of 38 hours with their family. This was a home birth. Kylie went on to have another home birth and found empowerment in this birth from Daniel's gifts of life. Definitely this woman tells an honourable journey, and this podcast will go for 1 hour and 20 minutes, and it is worth of every minute to listen to this story of love, life and death. So hi Kylie, welcome to the Circle of Birth podcast. I really appreciate you coming on to share your 3 birth stories. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ali.
Okay, so do you want to kick it off and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your family? And then we can talk about your first birth with Gabe.
Sure. So I'm currently living in Canberra, moved here from Darwin 5 years ago. Very difficult transition, but finally I think I can say we've settled in and we're happy here. My eldest son Gabe was conceived back in Darwin, born in Adelaide. I was in the Air Force back then. I've got 2 other children, Daniel, who died when he was a baby, and Saffron, who's now 6. So family of 5, my husband and I, and our 3, and I was 32, I think, when I had Gabe.
Okay, great.
So 32, first baby, 41, last baby.
Great. And do you want to get into Gabe's birth and pregnancy and how that went for you?
Yeah, sure. It's funny. I was just listening on the radio. I was just hearing on the radio this week about people who aren't feeling very maternal, and all of a sudden they get that urge very, very suddenly, and often later these days than what it probably happened in our parents' day. And that was definitely me. I think I was very full on with my career. I was an Air Force officer. I was doing lots of overseas trips, really enjoying my work, enjoying my time with my husband. We lived in Darwin. We had a lovely lifestyle, heavily into sport. We didn't really have time for kids, I don't think, and it wasn't really even on my radar. I guess I always knew it would happen sometime in the future, but literally overnight, probably when I turned 31, I think, I suddenly got this massive urge that I just suddenly really desperately wanted a baby, and it was so strong. I really felt like I wouldn't even be able to wait if we didn't conceive straight away. I really had this urge that I needed to have a baby. So and I'm not a very patient person, so fortunately the very first time we tried, we fell pregnant, which was awesome, awesome news. And I think, like lots of young people, because I considered myself still very young in my early 30s to be having a baby. And I think like lots of us in our late 20s, early 30s, or, early 20s, we kind of feel a little bit bulletproof and that conception will happen very easily and come naturally. And I was definitely blissfully unaware at that stage of the many heartaches that can come with trying to conceive. So I went into that pregnancy extremely fit. I think I'd just done an Ironman triathlon, so it was just, bulletproof. Felt great. Fairly severe sickness, but other than that, just a breeze of a pregnancy. However, the problem, I think, the main problem that I can recall is that we were in a transition period. We actually got posted out of Darwin during my pregnancy to Adelaide. So what that meant is I didn't have one carer. So I think I saw about 5 different obstetricians throughout the period of my pregnancy. And at the time, home birth had not even occurred to me, and nor had any sort of other continuity of care model, because I was in the services, so we had private health care, and it was just as a matter of course you were just sent off to this private obstetrician. So that was almost like there was never any choice there, and I guess I didn't even know enough to ask for a choice at the time, and I just assumed that because the RAF was paying for everything, and of course it was private, that would be the best care I could possibly get. So I actually felt really, really comfortable doing that, and I felt like I was quite privileged just having all that, not paying a cent and getting all that just handed to me. And it's interesting that the one person who kind of tried to advise me different was my mum, who had 3 babies of her own and 2 fairly traumatic experiences back in the day when, your baby's born almost necessarily via legs up in stirrups and forceps extraction, which was the case with my sister and my eldest sister, my next sister down, and I. But then she was lucky enough to find a very progressive doctor, even though we lived in rural Australia, and was able to have a beautiful, very natural birth with our next sister. And so I think that really influenced her view of birth, and because she knew what was possible and how differently she felt about that birth. Once we got to Adelaide, it was get what you get, because it was a busy time of year, lots of people having babies, and I had absolutely no rapport with this man. And in fact, I didn't feel comfortable in any sense with him. I didn't feel comfortable with him touching my body. I didn't feel, not in a sleazy way, I just didn't like him in my space. Whenever I asked him questions about my birth, he shut me down. He kept using the line, "Oh, we'll just be sensible on the day." The language was just all wrong, and I realised that in hindsight, and I felt very uncomfortable about it at the time. But I just think I was embarrassingly too scared to speak up against it. I think I was also going with the motions and aware that my choices were really limited at that late stage. Like, okay, if I ditch this guy, I couldn't get into any of the obstetricians that friends had recommended. So he was it. But interestingly, and probably luckily, he went on leave the week that I went into labour, and I actually got this really lovely obstetrician who I liked much better. It was cool. And he, and as I'll tell you in a minute, the birth certainly went down very differently to what I imagined it would. But he was certainly, his bedside manner was great. He was nice to me. He treated me with respect, and my family with respect. So that was a plus.
Great. And so did you, during your pregnancy journey, encounter any childbirth classes?
Yeah, we did. When we got to Adelaide, we got it was part of the local private hospital program that you got to go to. There was a series. I think we went to 4. So every Monday night for 4 weeks. About it must have been really close to my birth time at that stage. Actually, we probably came to it a bit late because of when we arrived, and then I think we finished the last one, and I probably went into labour the next week or something. But they were, yeah, so they were at the local hospital run by one of the hospital midwives. She was absolutely lovely, but there was lots of talk about pain management. That's the thing that stands out the most, I think. There was some good nuts and bolts stuff, like, okay, this is what you bring to hospital, this is how it might happen. I think the advice around the various ways your labour might start, or that was all good, that was all practical, but there was, there was lots of, certainly the kind of the attitude she projected was, look, it's whatever year it was then, it's 2001, you don't have to suffer pain, we can do something about this, we can manage this for you. And I don't remember what the time frame was, but there was definitely a time frame mentioned, like, if you've been labouring for this long, this is when we look at doing this. So, already planting that seed, you've got this long, which I found and I know that definitely got stuck in my head, like, oh my gosh, I've got this long to have that baby. So, yeah, that was just an interesting thing to look back on and compare it with my subsequent births, when I definitely didn't have that pressure put on me.
The clock, the good old clock.
The clock, yeah.
Yeah. And so labour started, and how did that?
Yeah. Look, my last week of pregnancy was quite lovely. Although I remember a few high emotions in there, and I reckon now that was just nerves and hormones a bit, but probably more just subconscious nervousness that wasn't coming up on the surface. My mum came to stay. We did lots of walking. We did. There'd been some confusion around my so-called due date. A bit of dispute between two obstetricians. One wanted to go on my cycle, the other wanted to go on the ultrasound. So fortunately ended up going with the ultrasound date, because otherwise I think they would have been kind of talking induction much earlier, because it was a full, 7 to 10 days earlier, the other date. So, a week out, there was lots of false alarm phone calls to my husband at work. But I think the day before I actually had Gabe, I woke up in the morning and I could tell something a little bit different was happening. So we went up to Harndorf in the Adelaide Hills for the day and walked. And by, I think, about 9 o'clock that night, the contractions were getting quite, I recognised that they were actually contractions. Called up the hospital and they said, yeah, well, it's probably going to take a long time, but come in and we'll check you out if you feel that. So off we went to the hospital, Paul, Mum and I, and basically from there everything just, I got on the treadmill and didn't get off for the rest of that night. We arrived. I was in pain, but now, looking back two more births later, I can see that pain was really minor and it was certainly manageable. The problem was nobody was saying that to me. Nobody was saying to me, this is the early stages and it's going to increase in, there's going to be a tiered increase in, this is going to be a build up. Nobody told me any of this, I think, and I was in an unfamiliar space. And the first thing that I felt uncomfortable about is number one, they gave me an internal straight away, pretty much as soon as I got there, and that hurt. So that was awful. Then they said, well, there's no room here for them, so your mum and your husband are going to have to go home. So I think by then we're looking at, I don't know, midnight maybe. And I just wanted to cry. I thought, this is not right. This is not right. Why are you sending them away when I need them here, especially Paul? And they said, no. Well, I said, can they just rest in the chair? And looking back at myself, I just see like this pleading little girl, I imagine myself being in school asking, and I've done something naughty and I'm asking the teacher not to get mad at me. And that's how I feel when I try and look back at myself on that night. Is I feel like all of the things I'd learned to that date were just taken away from me, and I just turned into this vulnerable little person that couldn't defend myself. It makes me really sad when I think about it, actually, and because I'll always remember Mum turning around and looking at me, and I know that she wanted to stay, and I know she knew that it was wrong that they were sending them away. But anyway, they went. The midwife offered me a sleeping tablet, and I said, no, I don't want a sleeping tablet. I don't take any medications. And she said, well, I really think you should have one to settle you down. And I said, well, I really don't want one. In the end, I think she said, well, I'm just going to leave that here with this cup of water. So it was almost like, oh, look, I was still trying to, I think you should take it. And then the contractions started coming. And then when Mum and Paul were gone, I started to cry because I thought, I don't know, I don't think I can do this. I feel like I was by myself. I felt scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. All of the ideas about birth plans and everything kind of just went out the window. But then the midwife that was there when we went in, she was quite nice because she came and said, she came back. She had a bit of a chat to me and she said, I think you should try and get some sleep. And she asked me a few questions about myself. And then she said, you know what, I think you're going to do really well. She said, you're really fit. She said, you've got a good attitude. You're healthy, you're young. She said, I think you'll do great. And that was nice to hear. And that kind of bolstered me a little bit. But then, of course, the dreaded shift change. And another midwife came in, and so I got up, I started walking, the contractions started coming closer together, and I think after about an hour they said, yep, okay, call your husband and your mum back. Bit blurry on what happened straight after that. They arrived back, and then I know the pain was getting worse, and so I was just walking around, and then I know the next thing I know, I had a new midwife, and she did another VE, and then she had me on my back pushing. So she said I was fully dilated, ready to go, and I better start pushing, which was, I had no urge to push. Mum and Paul were standing there looking at my vagina and could see no evidence of anything coming or happening, and I think Mum was quite alarmed at this stage because having had 3 babies, she knew that I just wasn't there yet. And to cut a long story short, this went on for quite some time, this fruitless pushing, until we changed shifts, and the next midwife came and did another exam and told me I'm definitely only 4 centimetres dilated and that it was an error. Having had 2 babies with no vaginal exam whatsoever throughout 2 entire labours and births, I cannot conceive. And I'd love to see my records because I don't know how many I had, but I had several more after that. So because my waters hadn't broken, they wanted to then break my waters. So then we had multiple attempts to snag snag the sac and break my waters. None of those were successful. And I think it had been a few hours. So then we went gas, which made me sick, pethidine, which made me vomit, and eventually epidural because I think I was so over it. Do you want an epidural? Yep. I said anything. Give me anything. I just want to have this baby. So all in all, it was 20 hours probably from the time I went into the hospital. And then Gabe popped out, and got pulled out. And it did make everything better. You know, he came straight onto my chest. He didn't breastfeed, but he certainly squirmed around, and it was beautiful. And I did get that rush of just overwhelming love, and I just didn't want him to be apart from me at all. And I remember saying to Paul, you know, hold his little hand and go everywhere with him. And he did that, and that was good. But I just felt like someone had hit me with a baseball bat or something. And then next thing I know, I was kind of yanked off the table and into the shower in a wheelchair, and the midwife was washing me, and oh my God, it was so invasive. The whole thing was so just, you know, and I'm a wide space person anyway. You know, there's very few people I let into my space, and to have strangers in it doing all sorts of things you probably wouldn't even let your own mum do was really weird. Paul drove Mum home so he could come back, but Gabe was just really settled. He just slept, so that was really nice. They didn't encourage co-sleeping, so we had him in a little hospital bassinet next to the bed, and I remember, and he was swaddled, and I remember just looking at him, you know, and thinking, oh, and the the photos of me afterwards, I'm just so puffed up and swollen. And somebody's told me recently that's to do with something I was given, and I can't remember what it was. But just it's really weird. Like I don't even look like myself. But I remember looking at him and just thinking, yeah, I'm so glad I've got him. But I also remember thinking, I'm never going to do that again. I will never do that again. I was 100% certain that I would never have another baby. And he just slept through the night, and that was beautiful. And the next few days weren't bad, actually. Paul was allowed to stay at the hospital, and it was kind of nice. It was kind of cute, but I really just wanted to get out of there and go home, and sort of Mum was there, and she could have, and I now realise, shown me a lot better than what I was being shown in hospital, because they just had so many policies and conventions, and you've got to do it this way, and we don't do it this way, and you must do it that way. And a lot of it was very different to the way I did things with with Daniel and Safi, but at least we were together, and the midwives were, the postnatal midwives were quite nice, if a little bit detached, kind of. It wasn't the same as having someone you've known, but
And so your postnatal period was fine in the next few months. How did you go?
Yeah, it was. Oh, look, I was overjoyed to have this little baby. We adored him, and he was beautiful. I did get definitely a big dose of the baby blues day 3. I remember, I think I must have been going home that day, actually, or maybe it was day 4, but I got home, and I remember, I can't remember, was it hospital or at home, and I said to Mum, I can't stop crying. And she said, that's all right, that's, that'll happen. And I just cried and cried for a day, and then I kind of snapped out of it, and then there was, the usual, unsettled a little bit. He had his day and night mixed up, but breastfeeding went really well, which was, in fact, I don't even remember my breasts being sore with him. I think he just latched on and off he went, and he sorted himself out, so that was good. And then I kind of just got on with it, and it wasn't until much later, much later, like years later, that I started to go back and assess what had happened. The only thing that I do remember is that when I was talking to other women, and particularly other women in my mum's group and who just had babies, you just notice all these stories coming out, this is what happened in my labour, this is what happened in my labour, and there was just this obvious need for us all to get it out of our systems. And I started to be really careful about who I shared my story with, because I just remember so many people telling me horror stories before I had Gabe. And I just wonder how much of that, without me even knowing it, went into my head instead of the good, positive stories that only a few people had told me. So I was very, very close with my nana. And she was hugely involved in my cousin, all the births and the initial, in the lives of my cousins and I from babyhood onwards. My nana was really involved. And, Mum said to me once, she said, don't forget, she said, I've learnt everything I know from about the best mother that ever lived. She said, the most loving, and she said, you adored her. She said, so if you won't take the advice from me, just remember where I got it from. And that's so special to me now, to think that wisdom's passed down, and even now I look at my sister, and she's a much better practical mum than me in terms of, silly stuff, knowing how to put cardies on a baby or a kid or whatever. And she's had twins. When my sister had her twins, her other daughter was only 2, so she had full-on few years of babydom, And I watch her sometimes, the way she goes about things, and it's just so nana. And all my sisters and I, and my brother and I, are very different, but I look at my sister Cindy, and I think her practical mothering skills, in terms of getting stuff done quick, and they're just brilliant, and they all come from Nana through Mum, and that's lovely,
That's so lovely.
It
the
is.
wise
It's really
mama.
cool.
So, okay, now do you want to talk about your next birth with Daniel? And,
Yeah.
tell us about this beautiful journey.
Yep. So Daniel, Gabe was already 5 when I conceived. 5 already? 5 when I conceived Daniel. We'd just got back from a big awesome overseas trip for 7 weeks, and we thought, geez, we've put it off long enough. I was having such a lovely time with Gabe. I was lucky enough to be able to stay at home with him. We lived in Darwin. We had a pool in the backyard. We just lived this beautiful, tropical, natural, outdoor lifestyle. It was really, I always say to Gabe, we had the life of Riley. There was just no pressure. It was just a really lovely, slow childhood for him. He could do everything at his own pace. He wasn't rushed to do anything. And, he was a great, healthy, adorable little boy. And I just loved my time with him. And people often say, oh, were you worried that Gabe wasn't ready to share you with another baby? But it wasn't that at all. It was that I wasn't ready to share him. I wasn't ready to share my time with him. And that's why it took us. I think part of it was the trauma of the birth, but that was a very small part of it. It was more just that I was enjoying what I had. But anyway, I knew I wanted to have another one. So we got back from this trip and pretty much same again. We had a couple of goes and straight away fell pregnant. Delighted again. Gabe was beside himself with the idea of having a brother. Because I think inside he had always kind of wondered if he'd get one, He could see other kids who were only 2 years apart from their little brother or sister, and maybe was thinking, oh, maybe it'll just be me. So, and everything, extremely, extremely sick again. But other than that, everything just progressed well. I grew well. My tummy got bigger. Didn't have any early testing. I didn't with Gabe either, and with Daniel, same thing. We decided not to have any of the early screening or testing. And then at 20 weeks, Paul was away in Perth, and I went, fronted up for my 18-week. So sorry, not 20 weeks. It would have been 18 weeks. 18-week morph scan, and I think I just made it in the time frame that they want you. And the worst thing that I could have imagined happened. They found some things that, in their words, didn't look quite right. And, it turned out that our baby, who we would later find out was our son and who we called Daniel, had a serious congenital condition. So just to pause for a minute on the way I found out that news, So I'd gone along for my morph scan on my own because Paul was away. And so the ultrasonographer he took a really long time, like a really long time. And I think I kind of felt like something was wrong because he wasn't talking at all. He was just looking again and again and prodding the same places again and again. And eventually he said, look, there's some things that don't look right. I'm going to go and get my colleague, who he brought in. I think he introduced him. And then they just spoke to each other. They did not speak to me. They just spoke to each other about what was happening with my baby, and in language I couldn't necessarily understand. And then he said, okay, this looks like one of the trisomies. I think he thought it was trisomy 18 at the time. And he said, we'll need to go and get the consulting obstetrician, which they did. She came in and then she started to talk to me. But actually he'd already said to me, this is really serious, because I remember saying, oh, is it Down syndrome? Because that was the only trisomy I knew of. And he said, no, this is more serious. Most people whose babies have this condition terminate. And like, whack, bang, you can't even, I couldn't even believe what was happening. I still look back on it and think I don't know how I drove out of that hospital really. But I'm a pretty calm person. So then I think the next thing's like switch my little optimism button on, and I'm thinking, okay, they're wrong. It's, please let it be okay. The obstetrician came in and explained to me, this is what we found. And it all still seemed pretty, it seemed like stuff to me. I've kind of felt a little bit like, well, couldn't you see that on any scan? But I didn't understand really the gravity of having that many markers. So they're called markers when they find one thing that looks a bit abnormal, they call it a marker. Now, that marker might be that your baby's skull is looking a little bit big. It might be that there's an important part of something that's supposed to show up on scan not showing up. It might be that their kidneys look too small, or that their face doesn't look properly developed for that stage. So there's all these things they put together. Now, if they've got one or two markers, it usually means nothing. They have a second look, it usually means nothing. But I think Daniel had 5. So it's enough for them to say, we need to look at this further. So, yeah, that was it.
From those markers, is this where they gauge then? Do you maybe want to tell the listeners just briefly what trisomy means?
So it means, okay, so there's chromosomes, all the chromosomes, you're supposed to have 2, one from each parent, and they're numbered up. So babies with Down syndrome have trisomy 21, which means they've got an additional number 21 chromosome. Now, all those chromosomes control something different. So with trisomy 21, with Down syndrome, the things in your body that controls, it's not necessarily, it's not depending on how severely that chromosome's going to that additional chromosome is going to manifest itself. It's, you can have, and they call it high and low functioning, which I don't like that term, but you could have a baby that is very minimally affected. It's barely even, you wouldn't even know that baby has that additional chromosome. But then you have, a baby who's very severely affected, who has a heart condition because of it, or has severe intellectual challenges. So in the case of trisomy 13, it's an extra 13th chromosome, and unfortunately 18 is very similar, and it's to do, so how badly that's going to affect your baby and how life-threatening it's going to be is to do with how that chromosome relates to what it controls in your body. So in the case of Daniel, 13 is a pretty important one that can affect everything from brain function to respiration to temperature control, so pretty important stuff. So the markers just show this is, so what they've done over the years is they've built a picture. These are the things we see in babies who have this extra chromosome. So 13 and 18 are quite similar in terms of what they can see on ultrasound. If they were looking at a baby with Down syndrome, they'd be seeing a different set of markers that are typical of that pattern.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that I link in the resources to all your links from your website in relation to that too. So if people need some more information, they know where to head to.
Yeah. So the big thing about getting the information when I got it was there's no specialists. Well, there are in the world, but certainly in Australia, the people you need to speak to about this are genetic specialists. So geneticists and genetics counsellors. Those are the people. And if there was one message I had for anyone getting this information, it would be do not make any decisions until you've spoken with a genetics counsellor. They're trained in these conditions. They're trained to talk to parents who receive this information. Sadly, so many obstetricians are not. And what happened in our case was I had 2 very nice obstetricians. They were quite compassionate and sensitive about what we were going through, but they knew very little about trisomy 13. And the more my pregnancy went on, the more that became evident. And what also became evident was neither did the paediatricians, neither did the heart specialists or the other, myriad of specialists I ended up going to see through my requests mostly. And down the track, having spoken to many, many women who've been through the same thing, I realised that so many times people are given bad advice when they're just at that point of, okay, here are your markers. And quite often it's the misinformation that then leads you on to make the decisions that you make. And I mean, it's such an important decision because basically what the choice you're about to be given is, do you want to continue this pregnancy or do you want to terminate it? And
that's what you had to just, upon reading your book last night,
yeah.
this was the choice that you had to face, you and Paul, was that?
Yeah, so they'd already sort of said that to us. Look, a lot of parents terminate, but we need to, but and thank goodness that they were competent. They were all competent at their jobs. So they had said to us, well, no, this is what we found. We are fairly sure this is a trisomy, but there's no way we can know unless you have amniocentesis. So amniocentesis is, a lot of the listeners probably know, it's an invasive procedure where they're actually going to take serum from inside, inside the sac that you're carrying your baby in, and it holds a fairly high risk of, I shouldn't say that. Depending on what you read, the risk of miscarriage really varies, and depending on who you talk to, sometimes it's really played down. They might say it's 1 in 100, but I've read it as being as high as 1 in 600 as well. So there's really conflicting data on just how high that risk is, and for me, it was a really scary next step to take. But I never thought I'd have an amniocentesis in a million years, but I also thought that if we don't know even what's wrong with this baby, how can we possibly care for him properly, and how can we put in place the things for his birth if we decide to go ahead and continue with the pregnancy. So, yeah, we went ahead and had the amniocentesis, and thankfully all went well, and it was confirmed. Yeah, I think within a week it was confirmed that Daniel was full trisomy 13, and at that stage, that's all they can tell you. They can't tell you how severe it'll be. They can't tell you how that's going to manifest itself. So the term they then use is not compatible with life.
Okay. And during that point, did you hire a midwife? Was that during this journey?
Yeah.
A midwife aligned with you?
I already had one. So we did. Sorry, I skipped that bit. Early on in the pregnancy, and this, it was just a complete fluke. I decided I didn't want to have another private hospital birth. I wanted, if I could, to have midwife care rather than obstetric care as far as possible, and I wanted to do it as part of a community-based program. So what was available in Darwin was the community midwifery practice, and a girlfriend had recommended it, and she'd had a really positive experience. And sadly, she'd actually lost her little girl as well. But her experience with this program was so positive, she'd recommended them to me, and she said, look, they're great. Not having any idea, of course, that I was carrying a baby who was who had a congenital issue. So that's where I was going. But I was at the hospital. You have to do an initial antenatal check just to get the tick. Yes, you can go through this practice because, of course, they're after women that are low risk. And it was just, I just stumbled, literally looked down on a desk and saw a leaflet for the home birth service. And I said, can you still have a home birth in Darwin? And the midwife on duty kind of said, oh, yeah, you can. And I said, oh, great. So I went home, rang the service, and my midwife Marg came out to our house, met Paul and I, and pretty much the minute she left, we just looked at each other and said, we want her. We just felt that comfortable. She'd answered all our questions, and she just made us feel so at ease, and completely been able to reassure us that, we're not just going to sit out here in your house and hibernate and you have this baby. The ambulance is going to be aware you're in labour. The hospital from our house, was 15 minutes drive. It was, I was completely convinced that all going well and my pregnancy proceeding well, it would be a good, safe choice in the context of my life and my family. So we'd already decided to go ahead with the home birth. Marg was away when I got the news, and she came back a couple of days later and came straight to see me. And I think she was just so helpful. I mean, I hardly knew the woman at the time, and what she did was let me talk out my fears and let me really say how I was feeling and be honest with her. And in return, she was honest with me and said, well, this is what I've seen in terms of babies with trisomy. This is what will happen if you have a termination at this stage. And that was really good, because certainly nobody in the hospital had completely talked me through that yet. And then it just came down to, at the time, what my gut feeling was and what I was more scared of, really, when we were deciding.
It must have been to feel that, going through the emotions for you and your husband, and then to have that person there as that support, must have been just really great to engage on that level too, I suppose.
Oh,
that constant.
Look, she was great. And 24-hour, here's my phone number if you need me. And I think the other thing she said was, look, regardless of what you decide to do, I'll support you. So that was really important. And I don't know to this day, because we never needed to discuss it, what the sort of policies are in terms of, say, a home birth service midwife going along to support you during a termination. I'm thinking that what would have had to have happened was I would have asked for her to be there as my support person, but not in her capacity, definitely not in her capacity as a midwife. But certainly up to the point where I actually walked into it. I think the other thing that some people may not be aware is that if you have a termination at 23 weeks, 24 weeks, which is what we would have been looking at, you need to have labour induced, and you have your baby, and then your baby dies. So that was a horrible, brutal thing to have to face. That if I go in there, and I say this complete without judgment, this is not, because I stood there and I made this decision, and I could definitely have gone the other way, and I'd be telling a very different story now. But I needed to know what is going to happen to me when I walk into that room, and what's going to happen to my baby if we decide that we're not going to continue this pregnancy. And I think it's so important that any woman who makes that decision knows what she's in for. Sometimes the lack of support for women who make that decision I find that heartbreaking, because we went on, and I'm jumping ahead, but we went on and we did continue our pregnancy, and we were surrounded by support. The idea that somebody would go through that and just not have the support that they're entitled to, I find it really devastating.
So during this time, how did it go? I know in reading your book, you and Paul talked a lot and made a lot of decisions, regarding the birth and the process from there. How tell us about that journey.
So we decided to keep Daniel. It was, I think it just I found an online peer support site. That was really important too. I just spent nights trawling the internet trying to find this information no one else was giving me. And I came across some sites in the US of other parents who were carrying babies with trisomy, and sort of reached out to them and said, well, this is where I'm at. What information do you have? And just so much support came back. It was really lovely. And I think once I saw what could happen if you had good support, I realised that I just had to go with how I felt, and my overwhelming feeling was to keep my baby. And I know I haven't had people say it to me, but I've certainly heard it in broader conversations that that's a selfish decision. People say that quite openly. They say it quite openly about people who have babies with Down syndrome. Aren't they being selfish? They're only thinking of themselves. It's such a big judgment call to make a statement like that, because I think anybody who's faced with a decision like that, they can only do it in the context of their life and how they feel. And you do what's best, what you feel is best for you and your family and your baby. And that's what we did.
Yeah, so exactly right. It's just all mothers, especially with the the changes and processes in their body will do anything to do the best for their baby.
Yeah, that's
totally
right.
believe that.
Yeah, me too. And sometimes that's going to be, you know what, I honestly, and particularly if, so some babies with trisomy, their markers, when their markers, their ultrasound will reveal a lot more significant abnormalities than what Daniel had. So there'll be very significant brain issues, or there'll be very significant physical malformations. And when that happens, it's a lot easier to predict what the quality of life of that baby would be if they survived. So I can definitely understand parents looking at these pictures and doing the maths and going, you know what, I just think for my baby that this is not going to be okay to bring this baby into the world. So I definitely understand that, and I don't agree with anyone who takes this moral high ground that, you know, that one decision's better than another. It's not. It's what's right for the mum and her family.
And so your pregnancy went well in regards to that. He was kicking around and moving happily, and
Beautiful.
all went well leading up to the birth.
Yep. No. You couldn't know except that I was a little bit smaller, carrying a bit smaller than I did with Gabe, definitely.
Yeah.
So all the way along we knew that he was small. No, he's wiggled, and so it was a beautiful pregnancy. Gabe was fully involved, and that's the other big thing. We really made sure that Gabe was involved, but we were honest with Gabe. We told Gabe that, you know, this baby had a serious condition and that it wasn't fair, but it was just the way it was, and we didn't know why, and that two things could happen. We could have a baby who had really significant challenges, intellectual and possibly physical, or we could have a baby that died, and that he could die any time during my pregnancy, and he could die shortly after he was born. So, I mean, I don't know what I expected Gabe to do with that info. He was 6 at the time, but he took it on board, and he said, oh, well, Mum, whatever. You know, he's still my brother. I still love him, and we do what we do. So that's what we did. We sang to him every night, and we talked about him, and Gabe felt my tummy a lot, and he talked to his friends about my pregnancy, and yeah, just really involved and very excited to meet his brother, I think.
Beautiful. And his favourite song was Danny Boy, is that right, to sing?
No, his that was one of them. Yeah, we Danny Boy, we used to sing him, and he made up this other song, Elton John's song Daniel. We made up our own words to that, and we used to like to sing that one at night. And yeah, it was real. I have no sadness when I think of that, because I think it was, it's gone a long way to making Gabe the young man he is today. So I think that Daniel gave us many gifts, and one of them was giving his brother a great tolerance and acceptance that a lot of kids his age probably don't have. So, really grateful he got to spend that time while I was pregnant. And, yeah, it was beautiful. And then, the birth 3 weeks early. So I have to, you know, shout out to my midwives here, both of them. Marg, the most amazing. She's a beautiful woman, a beautiful friend, and easily one of the most competent and compassionate midwives I've ever met. And there's a lot of them in Australia. We're lucky. It's just that often their hands are tied and they can't practice, you know, within their full scope of practice. But her support throughout that pregnancy was unbelievable. And the most important thing she did, you know, from day one, she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to prepare for a birth. And she said, not a death? And I said, no, I want to prepare for a birth. And she said, well, that's what we'll do then. She said, and not only Marg, but every midwife in the Darwin home birth service at some time, whether it was bumping into me at a morning tea or at, you know, International Midwives Day, or whatever, came and gave me their support and said, you know, so excited to be part of your beautiful pregnancy. And they were just wonderful. They were just lovely. And Marg's backup, my secondary midwife, Mo, and a completely different type of practice to Marg, but another beautiful, amazing woman, wealth of experience, and just a lovely person to have on your side.
So you and Paul were just surrounded by, and Gabe were just surrounded by love, by the sounds of it, and support.
Definitely.
Exactly,
and we were, and I think we told my family, obviously, and Paul's family, and they were all great. But we told probably my 5 closest friends in Darwin, 5 or 6 closest friends, and just this little circle of people who knew. Nobody else knew. Everyone else just knew I was having a baby. So through that, I got all the lovely positive comments and just that support, no negativity or none of those awful, sad looks. And my friends, till the day I die, I'll be grateful. They were the best friends. They were just, wow, just amazing, so supportive. Everything they did was right. It was great.
Great. And so prepping, so the labour started. Did you have a birth pool, water birth plan?
Yeah. So I had, so it was at home. We had it all. Yeah, we were having a water birth. I did quite a bit of research in the last few weeks. I kind of hit panic station. I went to see a paediatrician who I knew. She's a lovely woman and a very good paediatrician. And I did that at my request because I hadn't been referred on to her. And I kind of went and I just pulled up these reams of evidence I'd found on babies who'd survived with trisomy, because the Australian line at the time was still not compatible with life. They'll all die within, this period of time. And here I was with evidence that there were kids living with trisomy 13 and, in fact, living to adulthood with full trisomy 13. So I took this to her and I said, look, what do you reckon? All I want to do is I want to have this little baby. I want him to be comfortable and we just want him to have a good life, however short that is. We don't want him to suffer. We want him to know that his family's there. Am I doing the wrong thing having him at home because am I increasing the risk because he needs help? So she did a lot of looking and she sent me off to a cardiologist then who checked his heart, and it was really down to the wire because it ended up only being a couple of days before Daniel was born that I got an email from her saying, oh, look, Kylie, I've been thinking about it and I've talked to this other specialist and really we think what you're planning is the way to go. You're going to look after this baby. The hospital's just down the road. You can call us anytime. So basically she was just reassuring me, look, you're not putting this baby at greater risk of suffering by staying at home. There was nothing that they could offer me that Marg couldn't do. So we you don't know how your baby's going to be affected, but you know that things that are common are going to be apnea, for example, which is, issues with breathing, seizures. So there's things that as soon as you saw the sign, if it was causing the pain, of course you could get them to the hospital or Marg could bring oxygen or we had things in place. So we had a plan in place for every contingency basically. But what ended up happening was I woke up I'd sent Gabe in to sleep with Paul because I was uncomfortable and I jumped in his bed and woke up one morning and thought, oh, I recognise that feeling. And, and I'd started labour and the contractions came all day, just a beautiful day. I'll always remember it. It was the dry season and all the louvers were open and the warm breeze was just blowing through and I just, walked around the house, laboured on the beds. Marg kept ringing me. Oh, yeah, no, it's all sounding good. Give me a call if it picks up and sent Paul off to get me some pads and things I'd need afterwards. I think the guy came to give us a quote for the bathroom and Paul yelled out the window, sorry, mate, she's in labour. And he goes, oh, all right. He goes, is there anything I can do?
Oh, how sweet.
How sweet, yeah. If you want to come here and do these contractions for me, you're welcome. But other than that, and it all happened really slowly because it was beautiful, but then really fast because this is where I just was gobsmackingly amazed at myself that I could physically give birth to a child without any intervention. It all played out. Marg came, we filled the pool. Gabe got in with me with his little goggles, very helpful, pretending he was, he was a dolphin, he was this, he was that, he was diving down, he was coming up making comments about whether I was dilated and then eventually it started getting a bit more serious and I started so I felt everything change and Marg recognised through how I sounded that things had changed. So she kind of said, come on, Gabe, over here and I'll make you some Vegemite toast. And off they went and did that. And honestly, next thing I know, I was groaning and pushing and I had a baby. It was...
Wow.
It really was that amazing and that special. And so none of that, Daniel's condition didn't come into any of that. The only thing that we did differently to what we'd planned is we'd planned not to have him in the water because we just weren't sure if everything would work the way it's supposed to in a baby with his condition in terms of we just weren't sure how his respiration would be affected. And so we thought better safe than sorry. I'll stand up and get out of the pool to actually have him. But it ended up happening so quick. He just slipped out. We popped him on my chest, and there he was. He didn't breathe straight away or cry straight away. So I think Marg actually gave him a little bit of oxygen, and then the best sound in the world. He opened his mouth and he cried, and yeah, massive relief. Because I remember looking at him in my arms, and he was quite limp, and I remember thinking, you know what? If you've got to go now, I can. That's okay. I've got you here safely. You're okay. You've not known any pain. And I think I could have been okay with that, and I think everyone could have been. But thank God he cried, and then just amazing for 32 hours. He was beautiful. He didn't have any of the outward manifestations of trisomy 13, so it was actually a bit hard to accept reality that's what was happening. It felt a bit more like they'd been wrong and I've got this perfect baby, and in fact this is it now. We've got this baby forever. So that was a bit mentally dangerous, that first few couple of hours, because I just kept looking at him and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with him. But then we found bits and pieces. So So we knew, this is right. He and he had a cleft palate which hadn't been detected, so he did have trouble breastfeeding. So we fed him. I expressed and we fed him through a little pipette. He cried. He expressed all his needs. If he could wee and he could poo. So if he needed to go to the toilet or if he needed a nappy change, he certainly let us know about it. And I think that's a hard thing. Having had a baby who's got trisomy, one of the big arguments a lot of doctors use when they're arguing against, arguing for termination basically, is that these babies won't be aware, they won't be sentient, they won't have any knowledge that they're there, that their intellectual capacity will be so small that they won't even. All they'll be able to experience is suffering. They won't be able to experience anything else. Well, was definitely not the case with Daniel. So, he could have been any other baby in those first few hours, any other baby. So, yeah, that was beautiful. Stayed up all... Sorry.
Thank you for just mentioning that part too, because it is so important. That's one of the things that anger me, that parents get told things like that.
Yeah, and look, and I've seen photo, video evidence and shared stories with hundreds of other parents who would support what I'm saying. So it's this idea that you're just going to have this. Sometimes the picture's painted just basically this little bob of pain's going to come into the world. Now, I'm not saying that can't happen. There could be some conditions and there could be different severities of conditions where a baby will, and in that case, definitely, pain management, there's lots of steps you can take. But Daniel wasn't one of those cases, and he was quite clearly not suffering and not in pain. So
you guys spent about, you said 38 hours. To me, and especially from reading the book, it was just slow and intimate and just your family. Yeah.
So we stayed up. Gabe went to bed. Gabe had lots of cuddles and sang songs and did cool stuff, and then he was exhausted. Big day for him. So we took him off to bed and I kind of stayed there. Paul made me, I think I had some Vegemite toast and a glass of red wine or something.
It's a nice combination.
Well, I just, I hadn't had a drink of wine for a really long time, and I thought, man, I should be celebrating this. And, as I'd already expressed some nice milk, I thought Daniel will be right. So, I sat up with him, and I don't know if I did it deliberately, but I just was awake the whole time, and he kind of dozed. Yeah, he slept. He was all good. And woke up the next morning. Did we wake up? How long was that? Oh yeah, and then we had a full day with him. Yeah. So Gabe got to be with him and spend time with him that day. And hold him, and and even just be in the room with him, really. It was just lovely. And then one of my very close girlfriends, and she's the only one who did, she rang me and she said, can I come? And I said, yeah. I said, you can come. And she came, and she nursed him and held him. And apart from my mum and our family and my midwife, she was the only other person that got to spend time with him. And she still sends me every year on his birthday, I can still remember rocking him. I can still remember that special day. And so we had this beautiful day with him, and then at about 9 o'clock that night he started to get apnea. It was pretty immediately recognisable. It was like he was holding his breath, and he would kind of go a bit blue in the face, and then we'd just talk to him, or I'd stroke him, and it was like he'd come round. And this happened for a while, and I said to Paul, I don't know what's happening. I don't know if this is the start of something. I don't know. We've got to call Marg. So we did call Marg. We'd kind of just rocked him and stroked him, and we knew she was on her way, and she brought oxygen. But by the time she came, he'd fallen asleep, so we knew that he'd kind of settled himself. And Mum arrived because he was 3 weeks early. Mum had just come from my sister's birth of twins, so pretty hectic time for her. And then so she got off the plane. Paul went and grabbed her, and 1 o'clock I think she arrived, and she had she held him and sang him some songs, and got a lot of time with him. And then I sent Paul to bed. I said, you get some sleep. Mum's here with me. And we sat up and we had a talk. And then I think it was just before 3 o'clock. Mum gave him back to me and said he might be hungry, maybe because he seemed to be waking up. And all of a sudden he opened his eyes and he looked at me, and his face I can't really explain it, but I can see it in my head now. His skin, it was like he creased every muscle in his body. He just went really tense, and his little face just screwed up, and then he just went slack. And I think Mum knew, but I think I knew too, but I just didn't want to accept it that he died. And it was just really hard. It was, even though we'd known all that time that it was going to happen, it was a very, very difficult thing. But having said that, I think I put in the book, and it probably sounds a bit, maybe corny, but I feel so lucky that I held him his whole life pretty much. He didn't know anybody except his family, and he never got exposed to anything bad. So as hard as it was, and it was bloody awful, telling Gabe was awful. I took him to bed. We gave him a bath. I took him to bed that night, and I slept with him. And then I remember the hardest moment was waking up in the morning, because I kind of woke up and felt like it might have been a dream. And I know you read about that in books, but the minute I opened my eyes, I thought, maybe that wasn't real. And then I felt him next to me, and I knew it was. And it's like just this awful, awful feeling of acceptance. Like, I can't describe it. Probably anyone who's lost somebody close, and particularly people who've lost a child, will understand that, just that awful moment where you know it's real. And, indescribable, awful. Nothing good to say about it. It's just, it is what it is. And so from there, that's when you have a really horrible time, So from all that beauty and love and everything, then the next bit's always going to be really shit.
The processing.
The dealing with the grief. So I think we did lots of beautiful things to honour him in those next days. We had some really awful and some really good experiences in terms of the support and lack of we got, while we were attempting to get him buried and all the rest of it, cremated. But I don't think I tried a couple of times, but I basically didn't come out of my house for 6 weeks after that. I just couldn't face anything really. People came and saw me, which was lovely, really supportive, and so grateful for people's understanding of that. And that's how I was able to get through it. I think just being able to take that time and have the support of family and friends, and know that they were letting me have time to do it in my own time.
Especially, one of the things that struck me the most, and I think I mentioned this before we started recording, was that someone mentioned that it was a short time for him, but for him this was his lifetime. And I just feel that you guys honoured him from conception right to his passing, and it was just as such an honourable decisions that you made in the journey. And like you said, he died in your arms. And that's it. Just beautiful, Kylie. Just beautiful.
It was, and I think one thing a girlfriend said to me who'd lost her baby as well, which was such a valuable piece of advice. She said to me, "Don't until he's been cremated," because we'd decided on cremation, and that was a hard decision too. But she said, until he's buried or cremated, or however you decide to lay him to rest, he's your son. He'll always be your son, but you that's your responsibility. Don't be convinced by anybody that you're not to parent anymore once that baby's died. And this friend of mine works in palliative care, and she's an amazing, compassionate woman, and I love her to death. But she spends her whole life working with families to help them accept passing and accept death and accept the lead up to death, and then accept that period afterwards where they even need more support, during that grieving period. And she said to me, she often sees people being told by others, you need to forget about it now, that it's just a body now. It's just, and as a mum, you don't feel that way. You feel like, I think I put in the book somewhere that it's totally irrational, but you feel like, I almost felt like, if I could just put him in the freezer, this is going to sound really warped to some people, but you feel like if you could just somehow preserve his body and just get him out now and then, you feel like you would do that, because that physical link is so strong. And of course that wouldn't be the right thing to do. Of course you wouldn't go through the process of grieving and everything, but you don't feel rational in your moments after you've lost a child or a baby. You feel like, I want to do whatever I can to cling on to this, and I don't want anyone listening to think I'm unhinged and lost the plot, but those things definitely went through my head. You don't entertain them for long, but you certainly think, how can I keep? And Gabe said to me, he said, "Mummy, why can't we just keep his body?" And I thought, yeah, why can't we? Why can't we? It would be so cool. But, of course you can't. Of course you can't. He's not a living little thing anymore. But I just really appreciated my girlfriend saying to me, do the job properly right till the end. And that's where I think it's important that parents need to know their rights, that when your baby is awaiting your baby or your child or your loved one, parent, whatever, is awaiting burial, choose somewhere where their policies support what you need to do. So if you want to go and visit your loved one again and see them in the flesh, then make sure that you're supported in doing that, because once they're buried or cremated, you're never going to get that chance again.
Very good point. Yeah.
And there's all sorts of, so the first, and I don't want to go into this because it's really long and lengthy, but the first funeral home we went to, for example, some of the advice the director there gave us was just plain incorrect. Like, she started talking about how quickly bodies deteriorate and things that would scare us into rushing in and using her service, basically. And I later got advice from people saying, well, there's cultures that keep their bodies for days and preserve them and care for them and bathe them. And so it's all about getting the correct advice and just doing what's important for you to do. Like, obviously, no, not keeping your baby in the freezer downstairs if you're in your house in Darwin, probably not the best idea. But, another friend of mine who also lost a baby, they're doing some great work in South Australia raising money for what's called cold cots, so that parents who lose a baby in hospital are actually able to keep their baby with them for a longer period of time, which is
in the hospital.
In the hospital, so
that
their bodies, so that they're kept at a temperature, so that everything will be okay, and that the parents can spend more time, the families can spend more time, and things like initiatives like that. So compassionate and sensitive to the needs of parents who've lost a child.
Especially too, I think what we need to acknowledge is that, and in your case and in a lot of parents' cases, that when you lose a child that's just born, essentially, your hormones are still going through their process. What I will say from this, I think, I'm definitely going to link your book, and you have it as a free PDF download. That will be able to help people, especially with postpartum stuff. You've had a great list of resources there, and the story you've written is just beautiful. It's straight from your heart, and it's very informative on the same side. So going through your journey after Daniel, and then how long after his passing did you decide to have another baby?
It was really weird. I think you're so torn. One part of you just want to have another baby straight away, and I know mums that have actually gone on to do that very quickly after they've lost a baby. They conceive very quickly and they have another baby, and that has been great for them. We at first thought that would be good for us, so I think Daniel died in July. Christmas time, I was, my body was all good, and I felt, I feel like it would be nice if we conceived again. And I think we weren't using contraceptives, so we thought, if it happens, it happens. But a part of me really hoped for it. But it became very quickly obvious to me every time I got my period, it would be just this great sense of loss, and I really quickly sussed out that I wasn't lost for this new baby, that I was still processing my grief for Daniel. So that we said, nah, not ready. So we took a lot longer than I expected we would, actually. We just didn't give it any, we didn't put any effort into it. We just thought, not that I'd ever really I'd never gone into my cycles or when I was ovulating or anything, but we just, we're going to get pregnant. We got pregnant. Well, this time we weren't exactly trying not to, but we kind of both knew we weren't ready. So I guess I was sort of planning a little bit to not, to be careful around the times when I was ovulating, that sort of thing. So I think it was a bit of the age clock ticking, and I don't know, I was 39 or 40. I had my 40th, and then we kind of said, okay, if we're going to do this, I think I didn't want the rest of my life to be about, are we going to have another baby? So we sort of felt we either need to accept that this is it, we have our family, we've had our 2 babies, Daniel's always part of it, or we need to say we really want to have this other baby. And anyway, we said, I don't know, 1 month we said, all right, let's just give this a red hot go, and if it happens, then sure enough, fell pregnant. So, and we were overjoyed. We were really, really happy. Gabe was really happy, and we fell pregnant exactly 3 years after we fell pregnant with Daniel. So,
wow.
Probably to the day, in fact.
Yeah.
And and then that was, of course, everybody in the world who knew us was overjoyed. So, big outpouring of love, and and I'm so glad, and some really good things, some really weird things got said in that period, but just lots of love, which was great. And we were so happy, and knew there was no alternative but to have Marg again as my midwife and home birth. And so fortunately I got the exact same team of carers, including my obstetrician, so I got to see the same obstetrician again. So everybody, all the way along knew what was happening. So I didn't have to re-explain my story. I didn't have to, it was just a really good, positive experience, the whole pregnancy.
And did you have to engage in similar testing, or was that put out there to you, or you just...
So the option was there, and we did have the morph scan, and that was really difficult. Yeah, he said, yep, all looks good. So you're always aware that nothing's ever 100% guaranteed, but it definitely put my mind at rest. But I think I always knew everything was fine anyway. I think I had that feeling. It's all going to be good this time. With the other two, I had just gone into contractions, and my labour didn't break until my water didn't break until really well into the labour. In fact, just near birth, I think, with both of them. And with this one, my water broke. So with Safi, I was sitting on the lounge chair and, water broke, and that was it. We were off and running. I didn't really start the contractions didn't come for 2 hours after my water broke. So gave Marg a call. She said she'll come, but she didn't come straight away because there was no urgency. Then she came and sort of, talked to me and had a bit of a check, and, all was good. So
was Gabe there this time?
Gabe was there, and my mum was there this time too. Yeah. So Mum had made it in time, which was great.
Was he like the dolphin doula again?
He wasn't. He didn't get in the pool with me this time because I actually laboured. Most of my labour was in the bathroom, groaning into the drain of my sink because I'm quite loud in labour, and I really feel it helps me with the pain. So that's my pain management, is groaning quite loudly, and as I think Paul and Gabe described it as dying cow noises. So our neighbours, the houses weren't really close. We had a nice big block, but I know that at night noise carries, and I was very conscious that these neighbours next door, who definitely were not birthy people or even have any kids of their own, would be able to hear me. So I was groaning into the drain of the sink thinking, I hope that muffles the sound a bit. And that's where I felt like, because Safi hadn't moved down yet, so I could feel her starting to move down. And I reckon I was in there for a couple of hours in the bathroom just groaning and getting in my headspace too, because the broken waters thing caught me off guard, because I just thought having done it twice already, I just thought I knew what my labour would be like. So I kind of had to then go and say, okay, it's different. Get your head around it. It's all going to be okay. You can still do it. And I had these two little voices really, because once the contractions really picked up, it was a little voice saying, I'm not doing this. I am not doing this. This is no way am I doing this. And the other one was saying, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the hospital? And no. Well, then just get on with it. So that's what I did. I knew I could do it, so I just did it. And I knew everything was okay because Marg would pop in and just whisper in my ear every now and then and, check Safi's heartbeat and, yep, all's good. How do you feel? And she'd whisper and off she'd toddle again, and they'd all be hanging around in the lounge room. And eventually she must have heard my voice change, and she came in. She said, "Oh, do you want to come out now? And we might get that pool ready." And yeah, that's what we did. And the pain was quite intense then, so it was a long walk from the lounge chair to the pool. But yeah, once we got in there, I just, again, kind of went in the zone then, and doing what I needed to do, rocking. Just that water was beautiful. I really find water helpful. And Safi was born. It didn't tear, which was absolutely amazing. And actually that's an interesting point worth mentioning. I'd said to one of my girlfriends who'd had 3 babies, I know I'm going to tear, and she roused on me and she said, what are you saying that for? And I said, well, because I had a massive episiotomy with Gabe. I tore with Daniel and he was tiny. She said, of course you don't have to tear. And she actually talked me through breathing my baby out. And Marg had said that to me with Daniel, breathe your baby out. And I had no idea what she meant. But I kind of worked it out. But this time I was ready for it. So when I felt that really hard crowning, and I got that sudden urge to just do, a big grunt and just expel this baby, I slowed it down, and I still think it's just magic that you can even do that. I can't even believe you can do that with your body. But I did, and, so I didn't tear, which was a big bonus for me, having just to realise I could do that, and to realise that other women could be taught how to do that. I find that amazing,
And just coming to, like, I'm just picturing you back in the hospital with Gabe, and just that journey into where you are now.
It's amazing. That's the word for it, Ali. It was truly empowering, and it was Daniel's birth that gave me that empowerment to know I could do it again, and as long as everything's okay, I can do this. And so I guess the other important thing to say is, why did I know everything was okay? Because I trusted my carers, because I had no doubt that the minute they heard or saw something amiss, they would straight away get me to wherever I needed to be to birth safely, to have my baby safely. So I think that's the difference. People get this big alarm bells going about home birth and, oh, my God, but what you can't explain to someone who's never seen it happen is that these two midwives, who had supported hundreds of women in birth, know just by the sounds you're making what's going on in your body. That's
it's pretty special, isn't it?
It's special, and it sounds bad from a medical perspective because, how could they? It sounds like, witchery or something, but it's just that they're so competent, so specialised in what they do, I guess, is the big point. They know that woman so well. They that's what it all comes from. Knowing the woman, knowing what sort of person she is, and it all comes together, and then they know how to best support you. But
it's the ancient wisdom of listening, I think. That's right.
It is.
Woman and be there with her and
be present.
Yeah.
My second midwife, Mo, always emphasises and makes a great point that if you feel safe in your environment, it won't matter whether you're at home, in hospital, on the side of a river, in a car. None of those are the ideal places. You'd want to give birth your baby, of course. But if you have your support team around you, it's almost like you're in a little cocoon. So had I had to go to hospital and Marg and Mo came with me, which they would have done, I still would have taken that feeling of safety with me. The difference is if you're forced into a position where you're birthing in an unfamiliar place with people you don't know and not in a way of your choosing, I think that's when it becomes potentially unsafe. And unsafe isn't just about if you have something physically go wrong with you during birth or your baby. Unsafe is about your mental health as well, and your feeling of emotional safety. And I think that's what people often forget is you don't just have to be able to get this live baby somehow extracted from you. That's not the whole safety picture to me.
Well said. Yay, thank you for saying that. I wrote something, there was a sort of a thing going around on Facebook, and it was an orangutan that gave birth in the zoo, and the birth was just beautiful. She was obviously left alone, and she was in the dark, and she built her nest, and she licked off all the fluid off the baby after the birth, and it just struck me. I was like, well, if that was a human filmed doing that, she would be just ridiculed and told that she was stupid and all of this. But yet it seems like the zoo's a place to birth, because that orangutan mum was just praised and told how wonderful she is, and it's like, where have we gone a bit askew with that?
For sure. And I suppose the last thing I'd say is that it should be possible to achieve the sorts of births that I've had in a hospital. It should be. It should. So if a woman doesn't feel comfortable birthing at home, she should be able to get the support she wants. And if she feels safer in hospital, then that's the place for her. There's nothing to be gained from forcing any woman to birth anywhere she doesn't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So if she wants, any woman, hospital's the way that most women do it, and they need to be supported in their choices in that environment. So if they want to have their midwife if they want a midwife, they should be able to have a midwife. If they want, if they don't want any of that, if they just want their obstetrician to come and, perform a Caesar, they should get that too. But it's about their choice. And I just, we get too caught up in the home versus hospital thing when it's about it's your continuity and your support for me, I think.
Well said, definitely. Well, thank you so much. I just feel absolutely honoured to share. I know we've gone way over time, so I'll probably have to split these up, but that's completely fine. I feel absolutely honoured that you shared those 3 beautiful birth stories, because I met you at a baby expo in Canberra, and one of the first things you told me after I ate your beautiful raw caramel slice, vegan caramel slice, was that a lady cried.
Yes,
after eating your slice.
Bringing people to tears with my food. Yeah, so it's I'm not and I always say to people, I'm not hardcore. I'm not 100% raw, but I've gone through this whole cycle, but what I've basically come back to is, using lovely, fresh, local, seasonal where possible, organic where possible produce to do yummy stuff that's, good for your family, basically. And, I quite enjoy it, and I probably didn't mean it to end up the way it has, but, it's fun, and, we'll see where it takes me.
Yeah, great. And I'll definitely link to there, and so people can sort of see your journey and how that progresses.
Okay.
Thank you, Kylie.
No, thanks, Sally. Thanks for letting me rave on.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Great.
Did you connect with this episode? Then head over to our website, circleofbirth.com. There you'll find show notes, pictures, resources, and potentially connect with today's storyteller. Don't forget to sign up to be updated with new empowering episodes and content. Help the show grow by contributing a tip in the jar to make sure we can continue to better the podcast and connect more and more to the wisdom of birth and each other. Hey, and don't forget the iTunes rating. This has been another episode of the Birth Share Project. We breathe, we birth, we empower.